previous video lesson, we looked at how to convert between a string data type to numeric data types such as integer and double. Sometimes we want to be able to go between different data types, such as maybe between an int and a double or double to int. And so in this lesson, we'll look at how to do that. And that conversion process is often referred to as casting. Now, if we go back a few videos, we looked at the size of variables created in memory. And just to refresh your recollection a little bit, an integer was 32 bits in size, and a double, which contains a floating point value with decimals, was 64 bits in size. And sometimes we want to convert between these two, with one being smaller and one being larger. So if we go from the smaller to the larger, that's not a problem. That's called an implicit conversion or a widening conversion. The smaller always fits into the bigger. If we think about it in terms of an analogy with feet and shoes, a size 32 foot would always fit into a size 64 shoe. May not be the best for walking in, it's going to have a lot of room in it, but it will fit. And that conversion can take place without any problem. And C# will do that for us automatically. We don't need a process to convert. The example here is a couple lines of code. I create a variable called age, which is an integer. I store 17. And then I create a variable called age double, which is of type double. And I can actually assign the value of age, which is an integer, to the value of the double variable without any problem. And so the double value would actually become 17.0 as shown up here. Widening conversions would include things like going from a character or a char to a string, an integer to a single, an integer to a double value, a single floating point to a double floating point, or a short, which is a smaller value for a less range of integers to an int, or a short into a long variable. Those are all widening conversions, and C# won't give us any errors or warnings if we do that. The more problematic thing, though, is we're trying to go from bigger to smaller. And a bigger foot does not necessarily fit into a smaller shoe. So an example here would be a variable called pieces of type double, which contains 19.75 as its value assigned to it. That is stored in 64 bits. We want to put that into an integer. Now the problem with the integer, first of all, it's size 32 bits, and we have a risk of losing some data. An integer is a whole value. So it's going to truncate that 0.75. And anytime there's a risk of losing information, C# is going to give us an error as this being a narrowing conversion. And so what would happen here in our code, if we had pieces as double, assigning it 19.75, I have an integer of whole pieces, and I try to assign it pieces, I'm going to get that little dangerous red squiggly. That is a clue that we have an error, and it's not going to compile, and that error is going to say, cannot implicitly convert type double to int. An explicit conversion exists, are you missing a cast? And we are missing a cast. So what is that cast? That cast is to provide the data type inside parentheses in front of the data we want to convert. So this is an explicit cast or an explicit conversion. In this case, our double variable of pieces is converted to an integer before it's assigned to whole pieces. And this casting process has a method that looks at the value of pieces and says, okay, I understand we're going to lose some data. We're going to truncate the decimal and assign it an integer value. And it assigns it the value of 19 into our integer whole pieces. Yes, we lost some data, but now we can treat that as an integer. And I could display that whole pieces as an integer out in a message box using .toString. So that's how an explicit cast works. Anytime you're going from a larger value to a smaller value in terms of the data storage, or you're risking losing data, it needs to be cast using this process of putting the resulting data type inside parentheses in front of the value that you want to cast.